So animation is a really complicated subject, but since this is a basic series, I want to really try to kind of just show you the guts of how to animate and not try to get into like animation theory and the principles and fundamentals of animation, because that would be an entirely different series, which I will have an advanced animation and character animation series later, or I might already have it if you are in the future. So let's just go over some of the basic stuff to animating an object in Cinema 4D. So let's go ahead. You're probably bored of a cube, so actually let's not make a cube. Let's make something more exciting, like a torus. Yeah, toruses are exciting. Sure. So we have this torus here. Let's move it around. Now, let's move into the animate. We don't have to. We can animate in any layout we want, but let's try using the layout that Cinema 4D gives us or wants us to use for animation. So in addition to this is called the slider or power slider, it used to be called, but let's call this our animation slider, and then this down here is our timeline. So we have our object to animate in the viewport, and let's just say we want this object to move up and down over 72 frames. So we have to have our object selected, and in order to make keyframing work, remember we always have to set a key. So we set this key, and the way we can tell there's a key on an object or something's animated, if we click on the object, can you see here we have this key, and if we look in our timeline we have a key, and if we go into our attribute manager you see that there are these red dots, which means there are keys on that frame. So you see the key here on frame 0. These are these hollow red dots letting you know that there isn't a key on this frame, but this parameter is animated, so there's a key somewhere. Let's go back so you can see the difference. So right, you see that connection? And so then we would go forward in time and then make some change. We're just going to move this on the y-axis and then record another keyframe. And then we're going to go forward. We can drag this one too to the end, and then we can set another frame. So now if we play it back, we have the animation of this object going up and down. So something else that can save you time when you're animating, you can turn on auto key. So what this does, we no longer have to press the record key button. It will just automatically animate whatever parameters are changed. So we can just move this down here, and you see it automatically adds a keyframe. See the connection? There's your keyframe. Now it didn't add it on the rotation of the scale because I didn't move those. When you do this, when you use the record active objects, it's going to set a key on all the parameters. Sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't, but I just want to show you the difference. So then we can move this down. It sets another key. That's how auto key works. So once you get more experienced, auto key can really help you, but when you start out, I would recommend manually keying because you can get confused because you can accidentally move something over and then you have these keyframes you don't want. But you see, since I have auto key turned off, it won't add a key and it'll snap back to where it's supposed to be. So you can even play stuff back while you have it animated, and you can say, oh, I don't really like the timing of this. Let me try moving these keys around. And when I can, I try to work in the slider because I like these big keyframes. But other times you need to go into the timeline, which this isn't the advanced animation tutorial, so I don't want to confuse you too much, but I just want to show you how it works. So for this torus, since we used the record active object, it recorded keys on all the parameters. So we should have keyframes for our position, our scale, and our rotation. Now, where are those? Because here I just see motion source data. What the hell is all this stuff? Here's the torus. That's what I want. So let me show you how to get rid of this stuff because we don't want it. These are just all the other things in the scene we could animate. So let's select our torus, and we will go to show animated. So now it's only showing the objects that are animated, which is our torus. This is what we want. So we have this little plus sign, which we know from our parenting that there's stuff in here. So when we unroll it, oh, here's our position, here's our scale, here's our rotation. And if we open it a little more, now we'll see that we have, let's pull this up, that we have separate keys for the X, Y, and Z. So if you want to, you can go in here. If you click on the folder for each of these parameters, you can move all three keys, all three axes at the same time, or you can go inside and you can move just the one. So now, if we're rolling over these and looking at our torus, you can see that some of these have the key, some of them don't. And just look at the connection between what's going on here and here with these keyframes. Oops. And something that's handy, some keyboard shortcuts when you're animating are the F and G keys. So G allows you to move forward one frame, and F moves backwards one frame. So you're going to be using these a lot when you're animating. And then in order to play the animation, you can either click here or you can press the F8 key. And that's how you play your animation back or stop it. So the thing that you really need to understand about animation is just these connections and how to find the keys for the precise things that you want and how to find the keys for the exact things that you want. So when you come into a scene and you see something moving, maybe you did it sometime before, it's good just to know how to find your keys and see what they're on. So, okay, we'll click this torus. Alright, so all of its parameters are keyed. Let's see on 0. Oh, I see there's rotation keys here, so we can go into this torus and can close these. Okay, here, I see there's rotation keys here. Then I can go and see each individual key. We're going to ignore these curves now, because when we go into the advanced animation, we'll actually get into those curves. For now, just focus on the actual keys. And something else I want to show you about them. When you click on the keys, if you look up here at the key time and key value, if you have keys that actually have changed values, these aren't actually animated, the rotation, so it's at 0. So let's actually go into the position and click on these position keys and open one of these up. Let's look. Okay, so if we click on the Y position here, it's -146. Now that doesn't mean anything to us, like -146 to what? What's that relative to? So don't really worry about that. I just want to show you that when you click on these keys, it gives you the values in here. So if you wanted to zero this out, you could enter 0, and now this key is zeroed out. So I just wanted to show you those connections. So we're clicking on these keys. There's the value for each one of these keys. Here's the time for the key, so if you wanted to, you could move the time for the key, but it's a lot easier just to drag these around. So I hope this isn't too confusing. An easy way to delete the animation is to hold the Shift and Control keys and click and highlight these 3 keys here, these parameters, and then press Shift and Control, or you can go in here and do Select All, Control A, and delete those as well to get rid of them. So I hope you understand how these keys are connected. There's another view called the curve view, but that can be too confusing when you start out, so we'll go about that later in the advanced tutorial. But if you want to just look around and screw with it yourself, let's go ahead and do another simple animation. And so we have this thing moving up and down on the Y, and if you see here, we have F curve mode. So we can also click in F curve mode, and you can navigate around these timeline windows in the same way with the 3 mouse buttons like you do in the viewport. So I'm using the same buttons. If you experiment with those, that's how you fly around here. So if you want to get to your F curves, that's how you get to your F curves. You click over here. You also have your motion mode, which we'll go into in the advanced animation section. But if you want to look at your curves and your keys. So this is key mode and this is curve mode. But curves I find can get really confusing at first, so I'll save that for later. For now, just focus on the key mode and your keyframes and understanding what's going on here. So again, you want to retime stuff, you can look at your keys. You want to change them, reset them. Oops. You can go to that key, and we have auto keying turned on, so then I can adjust that key and it'll automatically change it. But the thing that can get really confusing is if, oh, you want to change this key here, and oh, I added a new key there, now what am I doing? So I just want you to be able to look and know. See, if nothing's selected, then you don't see keys here, so you're like, oh, you know, that might confuse you. So you have it selected. You can see them here. These match these here, so 35, 35, there's a key. And then you can open these up and look at the different X, Y, Z, which you understand how to change those. So we can go here and just now add a key on the X if you want to. So yeah, that's the basics of using these keys. And there's also different key types. So there's a couple different key types too. There's 3 different types of keys, and by default, so there's 3 different types of keyframes that you can use in Cinema 4D, and they really have to do with the interpolation, or how the computer figures out how to move an object from one key to the next. So there's 3 ways. There's spline, which is the smoothest way, which is what Cinema 4D uses by default. There's linear, which has no interpolation. So there's 3 different ways. So there's 3 different key types in Cinema 4D that you can use. There's spline, which is the smoothest way, which is what Cinema 4D uses by default, which you can see here on your timeline. Spline mode. This is set this key to a spline mode. This is to set this key to a spline mode. You have step mode, which offers no interpolation at all. So this would be like stop motion animation. It's going to jump from one key to the next. And then you have linear mode, which has interpolation, but it's not as smooth as a spline mode. So there's different reasons why you would want to use these different key types, which we'll get into in the advanced animation section. But I just want to show you how to switch between them. And the easiest way to see the differences is to, let's click in here in our timeline and do Control A to select all. So we're in spline mode right now. So you see things are kind of smooth, they're kind of floaty. So now let's switch into step mode. Now as you can see, it's moving like stop motion animation. There's no interpolation, it's just jumping from one value to the next. So now let's go into linear mode. As you can see, it's kind of moving like a robot arm. So there's no smoothness. It's like taking the natural movement out. So there's different times you would want to use the different types, but I just want to show you how to switch between them. And I have all the keys highlighted, so I'm changing all their interpolation at once. But you can actually do it per key. So you can have this one set to step, this one set to linear, this one set to spline, this one set to step, and then you would get some kind of weird stuff going on. And the way to tell which type is used is when you click on them, just like how it's showing you the value and the time, it shows you the interpolation type. So you can also change it here, and it shows you here in the timeline. These are linked together. See that? Step, step. So that's how you tell the key type. And something you're going to want to do, something you're going to do pretty often is looping keyframes. So another thing that's really powerful in Cinema 4D, even within this normal keyframe system, is the fact that you can retime animations after you do them as a whole. I mean, I'm moving keyframes around here, retiming it. But let's say you like this, but you thought the whole thing was too slow and you wanted to speed it up. So the easiest way to do that is working with this summary track. So when you click on this, this summary is like all the animation in this object is in this summary. It's like in this folder. So you see this yellow band up here. So now I can just drag and resize this band, and now the animation will play back in this amount of frames. So it stretches it. So let's go ahead and set them all back to spline so it's easier to see happen. So now we have a faster animation. And conversely, you can add some more frames. We're going to make this animation a lot longer. Let's go this long. And if you want to add frames to your animation or shorten them, all you have to do is go in here to the end of your animation and change the frame length. So we see we can set it back to 72. Now it's 72. But let's say we want 150. And then we can drag this thing out to see all 150 frames. So let's go back to the beginning. And now we have the same keyframes, but they're just going much slower because we stretched it out. And that's the power of using this summary track. So we can highlight everything and drag it to resize it. So it's a pretty powerful thing. You can drag around like that. But let's say we want this shorter. We want it 40 frames. But now let's say you wanted this thing to loop. You wanted it to do this speed over and over. So we can click on our summary track. And then now you see we have these before and after settings. So what this means is that before is, say we had these keys floating out here in space. This is going to control what happens before these keys, what happens over here. And after is going to control what happens after these keys. So if you have them starting at 0 like this, you don't have to worry about the before. But let's just go ahead and do both of them. So the function that we're going to want is repeat. So this is how we make a loop. So I'm also going to go what happens after repeat. And so if we do this, just watch our keys. We'll have that happen. And then it happened again. One more time because we said repeat once. So if I said like repeat 99, then it would keep going for a while. Right? So I want to show you before, if we also set that to 99. If we'd wanted this thing to loop wherever it was in time, then it would do it before, it would do it during, and it would do it after. So that's how you control that. And if you want it to look more natural, like this would be like a ping pong, you would set it to oscillate. Then it's going to go forward, backward, backward. And this is still live, so I mean we could time this and it's still going to follow all these rules and do all that stuff. So it's really cool and really powerful to manipulate your animation this way. And that's just using the summary track. Once you start working with these motion tracks, you can do an even more sophisticated job here. But even with these simple keys and these looping settings, you can try changing these different things. You can read the help to tell you how they work and show you some good examples of how they work. You can do a lot with the basic animation system.